So I really want to start with the obvious, but the obvious is normally the right thing, which is thank you so much to everyone that made that possible. I know that everyone says that at the beginning of the talks, but this is really not rhetoric. These are two new commission works. It means that for more than a year, very intensively, through many conversations that were collectively shared with assistant curators, technical team, those that were rendering the space for us so that we could visualize it, with people dealing with the sound that, as you have perceived, is incredibly crafted, with those that they were taking care of every detail so that we could sit today here together. And that's probably the most beautiful journey of contemporary art, is not only seeing it, but producing it. Because when you produce an artwork together with two artists so extraordinary like Dineo and Diana, you are continuously learning. So it's not about the object or the end result, it's really about the transformation of ideas through matter and the possibility of finding experiences, new experiences that then conduct to a new language and a new possibility of naming, which is, as you know, in times like that, incredibly needed. It started with a journey together, where Dineo was so generous as being with us. And in those journeys, normally we wanted to enhance a conversation with scientists and with artists. And on the one hand, you may think, oh, it's all about the expansion of a discipline. It's all about the interdisciplinary, like in the 80s and 90s. And yet, it was so controversial. First, it's so interesting to detect our own complexes versus other disciplines. What is science in relationship with us? How do we actually perceive the work and the language of science? But also, do we understand enough the limits that science and scientists are having in their own work? So in those trips, we discovered that actually there is no such a thing as art writing in science writing, because they do have peer review, but they don't have like a writing that is much more porous and encompassing of experiences, and also of a thinking that entangles feminism, questions of gender, question of indigenous cultures, and many of the trouble that needs to be put also in the research. So it was really, really fundamental to discover that actually science in the future would be much more dependent than from art and culture than we are aware of. And you may think, oh, Chus is always so positive with contemporary art. I am always very positive with contemporary art production, with contemporary art artists, with artists in general. But there is one reason, and the reason was in front of our noses, like for a year at least. When the vaccination was mandatory, it was the first historical time that people knew that it was something that could cure the disease and rejected it. So for the first time in history, science was facing the rejection of their own research, their own data, and their own neutrality, if you want. So why? And the reason of the why is trust. So it was a trust that was lost in between citizenship and the performativity of certain disciplines that are there actually to enhance life. Science says they are there in order to research, and this research conducts an idea of a life that we collectively share and actually is a common good for everyone. And yet many people discover and also question that it may not be common good, or it may be a good for certain groups, but actually not a good for others. It was definitely painful, and I'm not defending anything. What I'm saying is that it's important to understand historical moments in what they unveil. What are we learning from them? And they are actually telling us that we need, again, more than ever, the work of artists and the work of culture to re-entangle the trust so that we can find a common path, a collective path, one which has no violence in it, and one that is actually able to grant the rights to all forms of life. This is obvious. We have been seeing and saying it for decades. The way that we have been saying it has taken many different forms. It was actually at the late 60s that many people started to talk about narratology and the importance of actually hybridizing the narratives and the big narratives that have been kind of imposed into us by empires, by capitalism, by colonialism, by all forms of, let's call, monoculture powers. So, but still, we have been learning bit by bit to break it differently. And I think that we are actually in a good moment, in a moment where we are learning that actually we can break it not only narratologically speaking, not only by saying there is no one big narrative but many, but actually that we are empowering many to create their own narratives and their own storytelling, and their own oral culture, and their own reception culture, and their own interpretative culture. And that's why I think that this cycle, so I've been in charge of curating 2 years, the last 2 years of the ocean space, and it has been impressively, a learning process for me. I worked first with Taloy Habini, that was presented during the architectural biennial with an immense sound piece that she could not even visit and she could not even install. The second of the works was an incredible choreographic work by Isabel Lewis, Oceanica. And finally, after intense work, as I was saying, I was able to work together with Dineo, which was a dream, and really something that I've been for years looking for, and with Diana, that I did not knew, but actually you only make art projects to gain new friends, so it's an excuse to have a new friend in life. And this excuse has proof of self-fulfilling prophecy. So we are friends now. So I think that this cycle is actually making us face realities of telling that actually transform the realities of observing that need to be transformed, because if you don't actually change the observation processes, it's going to be very, very difficult to tell about reality differently. And reality is a hybrid, and that's exactly what I think that these two works in very different languages are actually telling. So I'm going to stop talking and ask the first question. So yes, Dineo, Diana, can you please describe the work that they can see here in your own words?
Hi everyone, greetings. I'm also quite nervous, but I'm happy to be here. I'm happy for everybody who's partook in this journey from before the 4 years and now, and during the past 4 years as well. To the spirits of the water, of the land. Inside, you see a work that's called Lerato Laka Leapela, Leapela, Leapela. It translates into English to mean my love is alive, is alive. It came from a series of dreams, dreams that came to me, and then also another dream that came to Truth while we were in the Solomon Islands as well, the one about the ants. And a dream while I was in Jamaica, a song that came, the song was saying, my love is alive, is alive, is alive. And I woke up in tears with the song in my head. And this became the ground for the work that you see inside. And the work is a 3-channel video projection with sound spreading across 12 channels. And then also invisibly in the space are also augmented reality drawings, spirits, energies that are also helping to ground the work. They are blessings to everybody who experiences them. And the work was filmed mainly in Jamaica, in the ocean there, with plants from the land as well, from Francesca's land mainly. And then also waters from Senegal, Accra, Ghana in general, and also the south of the US as well. And also the wind, recordings of the wind from the west coast of Africa, then also the coastal regions of South Africa as well. Also recordings of a South African healer musician called Tloko Segume, who also helped to layer some of the transference, so to speak, or the transmissions. That is partly that. And then also wood from Italy, from Venice, and herbs from Beirut, some from Swaziland, some from Ghana as well. Also layered is also a moment with Diana, spent in the ocean, speaking about the history of Portugal and the history of the east coast of the African continent. Speaking also about our families, our family histories. So all that is part of what you might see or might experience in the work. You'll also see masks inside, carved by a Jamaican artist. Rockstone is his name. I'll leave it there to give Diana room to speak, and then I'll speak again.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about the installation inside. Hope some of you had the chance to have a listen and watch some of the films and the work. The name ciguatera actually comes from a kind of like ciguatera is poisoning. It's like a sort of like intoxication, and it's a term that it's used scientifically to name that disease. It usually it's kind of possible to observe it in many places globally, but has been pretty much concentrated in very specific areas of the Pacific, mostly some islands in the Pacific, Caribbean, and the Micronesia Islands, which kind of crosses all the Portuguese, Açores, Madeira, Selvagens, where I developed this project, and Canarias in Spain, and Cabo Verde in Africa. So I was kind of becoming a bit obsessed with this idea of looking into different narratives and different archives which documented this disease since Homer's Odyssey, but also like 12th century, and a lot of like board documents from sailors, and during the colonial era we're also talking about ciguatera as something that was affecting pretty much all tripulations. So it was kind of like kicking colonizers' ass, basically. And I was also interested in the fact that these islands never really existed in the sort of imagery and in history in Portugal. I was going, talking with someone and just like, hey, have you heard about Selvagens Islands? I was like, no. It's like, yeah, but it's, it's run by Portuguese government, is a sanctuary, has been the natural reserve for 50 years. It's like, okay, nobody knew. Okay, I'm going to go there and film. This was kind of like the starting point of the project. And the more I was researching about it, I had the feeling that the name that these islands got was Ghost Islands, Enchanted Islands. There were like lots of myths around some events that happened there. There were many attempts to actually start life there, but it's so inhospitable and so rough that nobody had the success of actually doing anything or living there. But there are lots of vestiges, and there were a lot of resources, natural resources, exploited almost to extinction. The reserve actually was officially created 50 years ago, is actually the anniversary now. And since November, so there was a long time for us to actually be able to get a permission to go there, because nobody is allowed to go there. You need a permission, you need to live with the military. It's not easy, but it's really interesting when you have the chance to spend 3 weeks there and, to observe the ecosystem that exists at deep time, geology, how, ancient and powerful that place is. And actually, I also found out that the Pizzigani brothers from Venice were the first documenting Selvagens in cartography. So this was also like an interesting detail about that. And then some of the symptoms from this disease, kind of continuing my project on health and on psychedelics that also like involve these natural resources, I understood that there was a lot of hallucinations coming from this effect, from these symptoms when you eat poisoning fish, but also, this is a kind of a toxin that crosses the whole food chain. So it starts from, toxic phytoplankton, goes all through the food chain until it affects the humans, which is, we are the ultimate predators. So there was a lot of understanding between doing field work, field recordings, and then kind of bringing all this this gathered material to the labs. So I had a lot of amazing people supporting me in the scientific field, from scientists to astrobiologists, to explain how the protocol was done to observe this kind of new toxin, because there's no cure for it. So this is actually, kind of like a current threat, and we were trying to find out a little bit more. So other symptoms, for example, that sort of inspired also some of the storytelling and the narratives in the films, with this feeling of, your skin, when you feel hot, you feel cold. When it's cold, you feel hot. When you kiss or touch, there's like a sort of like transformation of sensorial experience when you are contaminated. And Selvagens, actually, it's one of the biggest, it's one of the highest percentages of contamination right now. So we had to live there, bring water. We could, obviously, we couldn't have eat anything from the sea. Everything was contaminated. And these facts and these stories and this background was slowly feeding into all the scripts and all the stories you can see in this work. And yeah, it's been a long journey, and I'm gonna pass the word again to Shuz, because I think I just covered what I wanted. Thank you.
Thank you to both. I think first question goes to Dineo. There is an element on the installation that perhaps you did not have yet the chance to experience, which is the augmented reality drawings. So when you enter the space, there is tablets, and then you can actually see a dimension of the exhibition which is different from that device. And I thought, I think it's the first time that you use augmented reality, and I really appreciate it, because it's I have this stupid hope that we can also impact in the way that we think and frame and kind of affect the values that drive technology culture and the way that we think about capitalism or technological capitalism. So I think that re-entering the world of the spiritual through a technological device plays a role, because when you have seen that video, which is around 18 minutes, and there is no words, there's only a song, and you are there, and there is a hand, and the hand touches the ocean, and the ocean touches the hand, and touches the flower, and touches the fruit, and touches a liquid, and touches the branches, and everything starts to mingle together, and then your brain starts drifting and thinking that actually there are many connections that you may do in very simple ways. You may connect all these colonial histories of people that got lost, but also plants that were transferred. So there is an incredible positive and negative history of transmission that kind of get replicated in that very gesture of just touching. Then you go to the device, and then you see those elements floating there in the space. And then you ask yourself, are they there all the time? Are they there actually observing me while I was observing that hand touching the ocean? And it's very interesting, because if you talk about the invisible under the point of view of spirituality or a culturally, let's say, frame context, then it has a meaning that we all think is a symbolical meaning. But if you then talk about augmented reality, virtual reality, and it is invisible, it is visible, but it is invisible. I think it depends who mediates that. Is the mediation your mind? Is the mediation a device? Then people think that you are talking about some sort of a realism. So it's super interesting to reflect on those things right now in a simple way again, and yet it's the only way that we can access in items of simplicity that reveal elements of the real that then you, in your life, you put them together so that you can create an interpretation of what you are going through. So I would like to ask Dineo, what brought you to those drawings? Why are they there with us?
How did they come? It was through a dream that I'd had while I was in Paris. There's a shaman musician called Katitu Tayasu, and I attended a talk of hers, and she was playing music, and I fell asleep while she was playing music, and I had an interaction with something that was invisibly in the space, something that I hadn't noticed before. But when I fell into the dream, that I could see that. And during my visit to Milan with Lucia and Fiammetta, we'd gone to see an augmented reality piece, and that had triggered that memory of how something is present in a space invisibly, and also the experience of having been in the Solomon Islands, and some of the messages that were coming through, things that were present but being named by different people that I couldn't see directly, or none of us could see directly, but they would, some of us would see a bit of it and somebody else would see another part, and collectively then something else was forming then. So that experience of then experiencing this thing that we couldn't all articulate was also part of, what brought this,
And for you, Diana, I think one can say that you have been insisting all the time in healing practices, and we are, all of us, very insisting on it, because it's a collective practice that actually gets embodied or enacted in everything we do every day. And yet, I thought always it was very interesting, your insistence in, focusing on something toxic, and yet producing a situation that actually could kind of solve it, or could produce a new transmission, because the ciguatera is not an obvious transmission. Nobody really knows what is wrong in the chain. We only know that the chain has something that creates a problem, and we know what it is. It's a disruption mostly created by climate emergency, but not only. And then, the idea that you have been touching those rocks, putting salt on them, producing, an idea of relatability, so that when we go there, we think they are real, but we know they are not real, and then we hang on there, so that you are creating a dimension of fiction that actually goes around of a way of filming and a way of conducting artistic research that is as we know it, that it goes with scientists that really engage with the conversation and what they have to say, and yet it brings it to a path that is not exactly where they want to be, but for us is very fundamental, which is healing. No? The healing of the ocean, the healing practices that can be conducted just by being there. with the rock. So perhaps you can say a little bit about that dimension of the work.
Sure. Also, one of the things that also inspired me to kind of like look into poison and cure dimensions in this project was also to find that, to know a little bit more about the flora and the fauna from the ocean and inland in this place. It took a while, but also like I knew that there was ancestral knowledge in terms of like finding a specific kind of healing or medicine from some of the herbs and some of the plants that existed in this specific landscape. But also, it was a kind of knowledge that I already inherited from generations in my family, and this is always something that when we look into the poison, into toxicity in this planet, we always try to reach for light and for healing and for communal practices and knowledge that we can share and that are accessible and inclusive and all of that. So this was a very important aspect for me. And then the sort of the geology that was brought into this. It's not really an imaginary landscape, so there's obviously a reference from Selvagens Islands, but also I was really interested because before I was filming there in November, there was a group of scientists who were training an astronaut. So there was like an obvious analogous relationship of this territory with Mars. But not only for that, because they were training this person in grottos, but also to find new kinds of bacteria that were conserved in salt, and also the potential of bringing plants to heal, like situations like ciguatera, for example. And how could these plants be taken to Mars? It could be the algae, but also like all these other resources that were, sort of like exported and traded for many centuries. So there was obviously a connection of like healing the land, healing ourselves, protecting this space by also creating like this imaginary characters in the films, but also the opportunity to have a character of the island speaking for itself, about its own background, its history, etc. And obviously, the sound is also very important. So in this case, I have to mention Odette as my collaborator for the sound piece. So we also we work together with field recordings I did from this place. There's a lot of air, water, earth, fire elements circulating through the multi-channels. And there was a sort of like a blessing along with the salt and along with these elements together that I wanted us to be immersed and bathed by it.
But perhaps there is questions from the audience, and then we can move from there.
Hi, thank you very much for sharing. I had a question for Dineo. You talked a little bit about dreams, and I just wanted to know a little bit more about the importance of dreams for you, for your practice as well. Do you facilitate these dreams? I was just curious to know a little bit more about that. Thank you.
Yeah, for me they're quite important. I don't even know where to start. Which dream we're in now. What facilitated our discussion now, our meeting, which dream is taking place. And how do we then craft new dreams if something is a nightmare, or if it's proving to be something not holding us in light together. Do I facilitate the dreams? Sometimes being around water, I find that helps with dreaming a lot. Traveling to Colombia and also the Solomon Islands in Jamaica, the dreams were interesting. The dreams are also sometimes somehow a passage also through different realities, I find. While Diana was speaking, something just started almost shouting about dreams as well and toxicity, about spirits of people in the ocean who had passed in toxic ways, and them coming forth to become healers of our time, and coming through our dreams through individuals and also collectively. Yeah, enabling us to move into a new dream. I guess the native Australians speak about dream time, and all different indigenous cultures as well. Yeah, I'm into it as well.
I would like to come back. Jules, you mentioned that question of trust, speaking of science and the link between art and science, and I think it's such an important issue nowadays, that question. And I was wondering, Diana and Dineo, both of you, you worked with scientists for both those projects. How much trust did you receive from the scientists you worked with? Like, what was your experience of, like, what level of trust were you able to gain from those scientists?
I think the first reaction is like they don't know what to do with us. You know, like they're like, why are you interested in this? You know, it's kind of like the first contact, and I love that because at first we try to understand each other's language. We try to find ways to think about questions more than to resolve problems. That's the trust I get from science. It's not a result, it's a journey, it's a process. And you know, like being in contact with people, you know, from astrobiology or from you know, chemistry, and kind of like having a lens and filming them in their daily lives. It's really like a fantastic universe. And I think it's also like I always get surprised when they are really excited about the opposite as well, is to really see how these conversations, these interviews, this archival content is a sort of an alchemy as well. How do we use knowledge and stories and mediums into something that creates meaning or just brings questions to, you know, to a moment, to a ground. And I trust them because they experiment, and that's what I do. So we kind of find a common ground by working together, and it's always like a very good and rich experience for me.
For me on the boat with the other marine biologists that were there, seeing they were just as enchanted as I was. Enchanted about I forgot all the names, but all the little fish, and they knew all the names. They just knew everything about this, or wanted to know everything about that particular being. So that was exciting also to see and experience and to share with. I had a mistrust of science in general, the ethics of it, the historical practice of some scientific practices. But that experience was enchanting, or this recent one. Yeah.
Can I say something just to finish to the question? I'm very skeptical of science. You know, like you can't just say, I'm going to take that. Yes, you know, you have to really think about different ways of care, right? For yourself, for others. And we all know, you know, what capitalism and, you know, and big corporative like pharmacies and all of that. Science, it's a big thing, you know, kind of, we can talk about science in many ways, but in terms of like health, I'm very skeptical about that, and I always keep, you know, all my senses open to really see where is this coming from. How can I know more about that? Can we discuss this? Because it's important to keep also that debate. Yeah.
Hi, I wanted to ask you guys a question. You share a space, actually quite, I mean, it's a generous space, but you still have to share it. Is there anything else that you share that you could share with us?
Well, the first week we met, we shared in the water. We shared the water shared us. We swam in the water and just spoke and floated and swam and just became relaxed together. I guess what Audre Lorde would call, what would you call it? Erotic practice. Not erotic in a sexual way, but in a opening up yourself to life way. That was a moment of sharing, opening ourselves to the waters of life and also to each other, to knowing about each other, knowing that we're about to embark on a journey together, even though we weren't going to see each other physically for some time, but that trusting that we'll be still in process together. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about that. We've been doing this for a few months, and actually before we created these spaces and these universes to invite you for them, we really had the moment to share and to understand our stories, our families, and this was a very, very important moment. And I think all the process and having obviously a show next to an artist that I respect so much and I love, it was definitely, you know, important to mention this, that we did share a lot on the way to create this. So I do your words mine.
Then on that note, thank you again to everyone. Enjoy
Thank
the
you.
coexistence, which I think it's obvious and poetic and beautiful and very open and generous. So thank you so much for coming today, and enjoy also the fantastic works that one can see in the biennial. Thank you.
Thank you.